Westminster Shorter Catechism, questions 63 to 66. Question 63. Which is the fifth commandment? The fifth commandment is, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Question 64. What is required in the fifth commandment? The fifth commandment requireth the preserving the honor and performing the duties belonging to everyone in their several places and relations as superiors, inferiors, or equals. Question 65. What is forbidden in the fifth commandment? The fifth commandment forbiddeth the neglecting of or doing anything against the honor and duty which belongeth to everyone in their several places and relations. Question 66. What is the reason annexed to the fifth commandment? The reason annexed to the fifth commandment is a promise of long life and prosperity as far as it shall serve for God's glory and their own good to all such as keep this commandment. We now turn to the so-called second table of the law. We move from love of God to love of neighbor. The first table has a vertical orientation, oriented towards God himself. The second table is, we might say, horizontal. It is geared towards one another, our fellow humans. Though, truth be told, all law is ultimately vertical. For when we offend God, we do not necessarily offend our fellow man, but when we offend our fellow man, we also offend God. And here we begin with the relationship of children to their parents. We are to show honor to our parents. We were created to be born into families. Therefore, we all have responsibilities toward our family members. And perhaps our family members first and foremost of all people. After all, families live together and ordinarily do not separate from one another. And so the family is a basic unit, even when children leave the home and start their own families. Yet, nevertheless, we understand that families do remain families. And so family members have certain responsibilities toward one another. But those responsibilities are not just children to parents, though it may be that and is that, in fact, first and foremost. But the Catechism uses the threefold relations here. Everyone, according to this commandment, has responsibilities towards others, whether they be superiors, inferiors, or equals. Right away, we have to say this. That is not a statement of quality. The Catechism is not saying that some people are somehow, some way, inherently superior to others, as if certain persons have greater or lesser worth than others. No, the language refers to authority structures. Superiors are not people who have greater worth, but they are people who hold positions of authority over others. Inferiors are not less worthy people, but people who are under someone else's authority. And lastly, equals have no authority relationship to each other, but are just that in terms of authority equal to one another. To be sure, everyone is under authority. Parents are superiors, their children are inferiors, and siblings are equals, but authority structures extend well beyond the family. Rulers are superiors relative to their subjects. In the workplace, managers are superiors to their employees, and so someone like a parent would be a superior in the family, but may in fact be an inferior in society or the workplace. But the point of question 64 is that the commandment has application to all people. It means then that parents also have responsibilities towards their children. It is not just a one-way street, and even equals have responsibilities towards one another. Ephesians 5 and 6 demonstrate this in a very clear way. Verse 21, for instance, in Ephesians chapter 5, talks about submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Within the church of Christ, every believer has certain obligations to one another. Even those who are not in authority over us, we still nevertheless are to submit to one another in the Lord and fulfill such obligations that we might have towards one another within the church. And this is also the case in marriage as well. Wives are to submit to their husbands, Ephesians 5:22. The husband is in a superior position of authority, and as such, submission is due to him. But he also has obligations towards his wife. Here, the inferior, again, inferior not in worth, but in terms of authority, is owed something by the superior. Husbands are to love their wives, Ephesians 5, verses 25 and 28. He is to furthermore care for her, and he is even to cherish her, verse 29. We see a similar situation in chapter 6, but this time with regard to children. Children are to obey their parents, Ephesians 6:1. Paul even cites the commandment that is here before us, the fifth commandment, in support of his exhortation. But not all the responsibility lies with the children. The superiors, that is to say the parents, have obligation towards the inferiors, namely the children. So, for example, the parents are not to provoke their children to anger. They are not to abuse their authority over the children. Children are not to be treated harshly, or conversely, they are not to be treated with neglect. Rather, they are to be trained in the fear of the Lord and to be guided by the parents throughout the course of their lives as children by the Word of God. And Paul goes on to expound the same about masters and slaves. So you see, the authority that superiors have is never an absolute authority, and the obedience owed by inferiors is never unqualified. For being a superior is no license to be a tyrant. Rather, authority is exercised in service to the inferiors. For the first, after all, as Jesus tells us, will be last, and the last shall be first. Mark chapter 9, verse 35 says, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. Which brings into view this idea that superiors in their positions of authority exercise their authority precisely in and only in so much as they are servants to their inferiors. Furthermore, inferiors are not always to obey their superiors. In fact, when a superior commands an inferior to break God's law, that inferior not only may disobey the superior, but must disobey the superior and obey God. Acts chapter 5, verse 29. So the commandment requires an active preserving of the honor of all, and it forbids the neglect of giving honor to all, so that there is both a sin of omission and a sin of commission in the commandment. We sin if we dishonor other people, but we also sin if we fail to actively uphold their honor, maybe in a way that is passive-aggressive, because passive-aggressive behavior is no less sinful. Now, while we seek to do all this, of course, to the glory of God, the command also reminds us of temporal blessings which flow from obedience. And the blessing, as it's told here, is to live long in the land. For honoring one's parents has good temporal consequences, and dishonoring them has, of course, bad temporal consequences. So once again, obedience is the better way. But this is once again about love of our neighbor. And our neighbor is anyone as close to us, but not just as close to us, as our own family. It could be someone who is as far away from us as people in other lands. You can't get off the hook for loving others and loving all due to a technicality that arises because of distance. Who is our neighbor? Our neighbor is our parents, our children, and the stranger who is far off. And such love is a matter, of course, of the heart. Even if we do all our superiors tell us to do, but we do so with hatred and grumbling in our hearts, we have failed to keep the commandments. So who among us can claim uprightness in this area? But love of neighbor requires not only honoring all people, but it also includes the care for and preserving of their very lives. And we'll consider that, the preservation of the lives of our neighbors, in our next lesson.